Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7 here on Broadcasting Scotland. I'm Kenny McBride, and joining me at the desk tonight is Sam Payton from the Save Loch Lomond campaign. Sam, how are you tonight?
I'm fine. How are you, Kenny?
I'm excellent, and it's good to have you here.
Thank you.
So our first story tonight, Ofcom will be put in charge of regulating the internet, the government has announced, with executives at internet firms potentially facing substantial fines or even prison sentences if they fail to protect users from harmful and illegal content online. Under the proposals, Ofcom will not have the power to remove specific posts from social media platforms. Instead, it will require internet companies such as Facebook and Google to publish explicit statements setting out which content and behaviour they deem to be acceptable on their sites. The media regulator will then ensure internet businesses enforce these standards consistently and transparently. The Culture Secretary, Nicky Morgan, and the Home Secretary, Priti Patel, promised that changes to the proposals would guarantee free speech for adults online and only target larger internet businesses. However, some tech startup groups warned that it would still place an enormous burden on smaller businesses to police content that is potentially harmful but not illegal. Among the proposals announced today, it was revealed any business that enables the sharing of user-generated content, such as online comments or video uploads, is likely to be affected by the new rules on reducing online harms, with hundreds of thousands of British companies affected. Internet businesses will be required to publish annual transparency reports explaining what harmful content they have removed and how they are meeting their standards. The government wants companies to bring back age verification for certain websites, following an abandoned attempt to introduce it last year to restrict access to online pornography. The plan to require regulation has already raised concerns among the publishers of major newspapers, with some outlets have campaigned for the legislation as a way of curtailing the power of internet companies, fearful that their own news website comment sections could now be regulated for online harms. Ministers have previously reassured traditional publishers that they will be excluded from the legislation. And Sam, what do you make of this idea that Facebook, YouTube, Twitter and so on will now be liable for removing all harmful content from their platforms?
It's a double-edged sword, really, isn't it? Because it's one of those ones where, yeah, there's a lot, we all see things that are quite potentially harmful, inciting hatred and various other things online and social media. But the problem is we still have the right of freedom of speech, so it's getting this balance. So yeah, I'm quite fearful, as much as, yeah, it'd be good to see them be more active in removing certain things, especially for protecting the younger age group, the more vulnerable. But yeah, when it comes to, as I said there, people making comments on posts and forums, how is that going to be regulated? Because people do have the freedom of speech as long as they are not inciting hatred. So it becomes quite difficult.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at something like YouTube, where hundreds of videos, millions of videos are being uploaded all the time, and then people are commenting on those videos. YouTube has already kind of demonetized a lot of accounts for what some people would regard as controversial, but it's just, you know, maybe political ideas that are a bit outside the mainstream. You're not allowed to talk about certain issues. For example, virtually any video now where you mention that date in September 2001 with the planes and the buildings, the videos will automatically get demonetized. There's just a censor that says they're talking about something that we don't want people talking about. And that kind of thing, I think, poses a really serious problem. If the companies are getting threatened with, you know, prison sentences for the executives, they're almost certainly going to move to the most restrictive rules that they can, and that, I think, poses a problem.
It does pose a problem because, again, it affects our freedom of speech. And as you say, I mean, on Facebook, on YouTube, you see this happening. You also see it on Twitter with accounts where one of our Save Loch Lomond accounts was suspended. To this day, we still don't know why it was suspended. All we were told, it was suspended by accident due to the algorithms. So the person using that account had been talking about various different subjects, as we do on Twitter, and ended up the account was suspended by Twitter. We had received an email saying the account due to violation, but we still don't know what it was, because eventually, after bombarding Twitter, as campaign people we are, we eventually got an email back saying that it was a mistake on their behalf. It was due to the algorithms picking up something. So yeah, it becomes quite dangerous, and especially for small businesses and small internet businesses. This is going to have a knock-on effect with them, because they are going to be terrified. And if they're going to have to then produce paperwork to prove that they are complying with this, it's then adding on that pressure onto them. And it will affect the small businesses more than the big boys, because the big boys
have the resources to manage these things.
To do these things. Small businesses is normally one person or two people, or just a very small amount of employees. And I'm fearful that it would affect them more so than the big boys. But yeah, I'm also fearful. Yes, we want to protect everybody using the internet, but where do you draw the line of freedom of speech? Because somebody's idealistics may not be someone else's, and I dread saying that, because there's so many things that I don't like saying, but sometimes I just need to
accept that that's the price you pay for
the internet. That sometimes living in a democracy, freedom of speech, there are some things that you see that you just need to be adult enough to say, I don't agree with that. Nobody has been harmed. That's their views. As long as somebody's not been harmed, scroll by. If there's somebody being harmed, report it to the necessary authorities. If it's the website, if you can do it, report it to them. If it's a police matter, then obviously report it to the police.
Absolutely. Moving on though, a good news story in Scotland. The value of Scotch whisky exports rose to a record high last year, backed by booming sales in countries such as Taiwan and India, which helped offset concerns over tariffs and the uncertainty caused by Brexit. Overseas sales of Scotch whisky rose more than 4% to £4.9 billion in 2019. The United States was the most valuable destination for Scotch, rising 2.8% to £1.1 billion, even as tariffs on single malts and some liqueurs were introduced in October. The United States announced last year it was imposing 25% duties on a range of European products, including Scotch whisky, as punishment for illegal EU aircraft subsidies. The Scotch Whisky Association said that move had resulted in exports to the US dropping by a quarter in the final 3 months of 2019, compared with the previous year. The tariffs are hitting producers hard, particularly small distillers, SWA Chief Executive Karen Betts said in a statement. Some are now asking themselves how they can continue exporting to the US, whether they can build up alternative markets, which is not something that can be done quickly, and if not, how their businesses will cope. A UK government spokesman said that tariffs do not benefit Britain, the European Union, or the United States. We have raised the issue at the highest levels of the US administration, including with the President, the spokesman said. Other markets grew strongly though. Exports of Scotch to Taiwan rose by 22% and to India by 19.7% last year. So Sam, how does this sound to you? Is this good news for Scotland?
In terms of the exports to Taiwan and India, brain went dead there. That's good news, that's brilliant. In terms of the tariffs set by America, I think it's quite silly, because they're just kind of shooting themselves in the foot, really, because they're missing out. Or eventually, you know, the small producers of whisky in Scotland, they won't be able to sustain that for a long time, these tariffs. So they are going to start to look at other markets. And I'm afraid then, where does that leave America with their, I'm going to say favourite tipple, because it's mine, but never mind. But where does that leave them? They're not going to be able to enjoy our lovely whisky, because, you know, the smaller businesses are not going to sustain those tariffs at all.
Well, of course, you were talking to Ruth last night, and one of the concerns of Keep Scotland the brand is this idea that if the protections that the EU provides for Scotch being a Scottish product.
Yes.
If those are abandoned, then in theory, Scotch could be something that the US demands can be made in the US.
But however, it's not going to be Scotch.
Yeah, well, it wouldn't be Scottish, but if they're able to negotiate those rules, then that's
that's the problem,
that's
isn't
something
it?
that can happen now.
You know, and it's all about us protecting our brands and our fantastic products that come from here.
Exactly.
And no, I think the US have maybe kind of shot themselves in the foot in that one.
Yeah. Anyway, moving on, we do have a story from Westminster, and I believe we have a clip we're about to show you from Prime Minister's questions this afternoon.
What's the case? Take the example of a young black boy who came to the UK aged 5 and is now being deported after serving time for a drugs offence. If there was a case of a young white boy with blonde hair who later dabbled in Class A drugs and conspired with a friend to beat up a journalist, would he deport that boy, or is it, Mr. Speaker, is it one rule for young black boys from the Caribbean and another for white boys from the United States? Right?
That was, of course, Jeremy Corbyn taking a shot at Boris Johnson. The Prime Minister was born in New York and gave up his US citizenship in 2016. He admitted he had tried cocaine as a teenager and was recorded in 1990 on a call with his friend Darius Guppy, who was discussing how he planned on beating up a fellow journalist. Corbyn was making reference to the controversial deportation of ex-offenders to Jamaica. About 50 people were due to be flown to the country earlier this week, including those convicted of rape, manslaughter and drugs offences. However, the Court of Appeal stopped the deportation of 25 people due to be on the flight over concerns that they had not had adequate access to legal advice in their case. And this, it was a really powerful line from Jeremy Corbyn, I thought, kind of bringing back echoes of the Windrush scandal, which the previous Tory government had to deal with, or caused and then had to deal with. So what did you make of Corbyn's performance today?
I was sitting watching it while I was working. It was one of those ones, working away and watching this, and good on him. It had to be said. Good on him. It certainly is very much with this government in the UK that is very much one rule for black boys and one rule for white boys, and that seems to be what's becoming a bit more apparent as time goes on. This kind of rhetoric is coming out more from the Brexit referendum, and we're seeing more of it. This regarding the people being deported back to Jamaica is just appalling. If they're going to start deporting people for having a criminal record or back to their place of work, it needs to work in all levels of society, not just who they deem. Yeah,
and with Boris Johnson especially, this is a guy, as we said, has been open about drug use in the past. He stated in his autobiography, I believe, that after one particularly rambunctious night out with the Bullingdon Club at university, they had looted Fortnum and Mason. They'd smashed the windows and taken stuff out of the window. Now, if black kids did that after, a black kid gets shot to death by the police, and they react badly to that, and there's some looting, then they get treated like terrorists.
Oh, they certainly do.
Boris Johnson gets a free pass because he's a rich white boy at Oxford, has all the right connections, and ends up becoming Prime Minister without any mark against his name.
This is the thing. It's very much a case of one rule for one rule for another. And as you say, he's became Prime Minister, whereas if that was a young black boy, he would have a criminal record. He would have that on his record for the rest of his life, which would affect employment,
all these things.
Everything. And I just think he's a despicable man. He really is. Today I was shouting at the telly a lot more worse curse words than that. But he is. I think I've even just ran out of curse words for him now. He's despicable, really.
Yeah. Anyway, also at Westminster today, Shadow Scotland Secretary Mary Black today challenged the UK government to devolve all social security powers to Scotland after Westminster's Work and Pensions Minister admitted that the Scottish child payment is an example of devolution working well. After Will Quince's admission, Black asked why, if devolution is working when it comes to social security, then why not devolve all social security powers to Scotland so it can go further? Currently, only 16% of social security spending is devolved to Scotland. Last year, the SNP Scottish Government introduced the Scottish Child Payment that will provide eligible families with £10 a week for every child under 16, due to be rolled out starting in 2021. The new benefit was hailed as a golden opportunity to make progress in solving child poverty. The payment is projected to lift 30,000 children out of relative poverty by 2024, and in contrast to the Tories' two-child limit policy, there is no cap on the number of children in families. And what do you make of this? I'm sure it's not an idea you would disagree with.
Oh, definitely not. I think it's a great idea. It is fantastic. Again, Scotland's leading the way on how we deal with poverty, and it is great. And the fact that there's not a cap on it as well, because people can end up in situations, loss of jobs and whatever. They could start off with a fantastic job, have a good couple of kids, have a big family, and then something happens, illness, redundancy, whatever. To have this cap is just like punishing. It makes absolutely no sense. But also, they're not going to want to devolve all the welfare powers. As long as they keep a tight rope on us, they have control. The more powers they give Scotland, the less control they have over the Scottish Parliament.
Absolutely. The SNP has challenged shameless Ruth Davidson to choose between her job as an MSP and a position in the House of Lords, after she admitted to the Courier that the idea was flattering and she would seriously consider taking a peerage. It has been reported that Ms Davidson is set to be appointed to the Lords, giving her a second parliamentary job and an income for life with no democratic accountability. Davidson has previously faced widespread criticism for accepting a £50,000 job with a PR and lobbying firm while sitting as an MSP, an appointment described as unethical. Rona Mackay MSP said, "It's no surprise that the Tories are in it for themselves. What's shocking is that Ruth Davidson doesn't even pay lip service to the constituents she's supposed to answer to. Accepting a seat in the old-fashioned House of Lords and being handed a fat salary without any democratic accountability would show just how shameless Ruth Davidson is. The House of Lords has no place in a modern democracy and erodes public trust in our politics, allowing the Westminster parties to reward selfish donors, cronies, and politicians rejected by the voters. If Ruth Davidson isn't willing to focus on representing her constituents, she should do the decent thing and stand down as an MSP so the people of Edinburgh Central can pick a representative who will." Now, some fairly forceful language there, but I think it's quite hard to argue against, isn't it, Sam?
It is. I agree with that. It's one of those ones. But yeah, once again, it's about the Tories looking after themselves and, and making sure they're okay. I don't agree with the House of Lords at all. I think they should just get rid of. But yeah, are we surprised?
I don't think we are, no.
No.
Also at Westminster today, SNP MP Kirsten Oswald today challenged Boris Johnson on his promise to tackle inequality in the UK, asking if the new daily allowance for the unelected House of Lords being more than a monthly universal credit payment is the levelling up that he keeps talking about. The SNP has said that Boris Johnson completely missed the point after he responded that he hates to agree with these people, referring to SNP MPs, and added that he finds it odd that the House of Lords would do that, failing to address Ms Oswald's question. The new daily allowance for the unelected and unaccountable House of Lords is set to rise to £323. The monthly allowance for a single person over 25 on universal credit is £317.82. After a decade of Tory austerity, child poverty and pensioner poverty has increased, and 14 million people in the UK are now living in poverty, according to the Joseph Rowntree Foundation. Commenting, the MP for East Renfrewshire said, Boris Johnson completely missed the point of my question. It is a disgrace and a stain on society that an unelected and unaccountable member of the outdated House of Lords earns more in a day than a single person does on universal credit in a month. But the Tories just don't get it, and they never will. What did you make of Kirsten Oswald's question then?
Yeah, I was watching this, and yeah, just there's two fundamental things going on here. One, the shown of complete contempt towards the SNP and the Scottish people, and secondly, he has proven he doesn't get how the average normal person lives within the UK, whether it's Scotland, England, Ireland or Wales. They don't get it. They are in a total different world from the normal everyday working people. In terms of these people, yeah, they're just, I think it doesn't matter who asks him a question. From the SNP ranks, you can see he is not properly listening to what they're saying. He is not getting, he is not interested. When he said that, it was like, oh, yeah, once again I've run out of curse.
I mean, the question around the House of Lords, I mean, it's two stories today linked to the House of Lords. One, Ruth Davidson talking about taking on a peerage when she already has a very well-paid and very, highly pressured and important job. Being a constituency MSP is an important job. There are a lot of issues that her constituents, I'm sure, would wish her to raise, and yet she is notorious for not holding constituency surgeries. She just doesn't talk to the voters. And we always, there was always a kind of an excuse for that, well, she's the leader and she's got other responsibilities that take her away from doing a lot of constituency work. And there is the flexibility, I suppose, to assign a regional, a list MSP to cover the constituency in that sort of situation. But she cannot possibly do her job as a constituency MSP or as an MSP of any kind if she's spending time in the House of Lords.
No, she can't. It's impossible. Because if she can't do her job as an MSP at the moment, she certainly won't be able to do it. How's she going to balance that? Now, one of the reasons she stepped down as leader was to spend more time with family. For
Exactly.
So you can't
How can she do that if she's flying back and forth to London?
That as well. And her immediate responsibilities as to her constituents. After all, they have voted her in. They have the ones who have voted her in to enable her to earn a comfortable salary as an MSP. If she is not willing to do that job to the best of her ability, then she needs to step back. And I think that goes for any MSP or anybody we elect. There needs to be a kind of level where the electorate can turn around and say, right, you're not holding your surgeries, you're not listening to the people that voted you in, therefore we want to challenge you on this. There's got to be something, because Ruth Davidson is the prime example of somebody getting away. Basically, if you went to work, you wouldn't get paid for sitting doing nothing.
No.
You would be pulled in to the back office and given a wee polite chat and things like that. There's got to be something there.
And I wouldn't be able to take another job in the House of Lords.
Oh, certainly not.
I wouldn't be able to say, well, I just need to nick off today because I'm going to go and pick up 300 quid to have a snap in the House of Lords.
Yeah, I'm going to go for a wee snooze and have a wee bit of lunch and things like that and claim that on
expenses,
season, things like that. It's not, but then again, it goes back to, again, with the Conservatives, they're in a different world from the rest of us. They are on a par of their own.
Well, of course, the House of Lords doesn't just accept Tories. there's...
Oh yeah, there's other ones as well.
There's innumerable Labour and Lib Dem people who, having been sacked by the electorate, and that's the bit
That's the thing.
That's the bit that makes it worse for me. The Labour government under Tony Blair reformed the House of Lords to take out a lot of the hereditary peers. And there's obviously a strong argument against people being legislators by accident of birth. But I almost think that what they did was made it worse,
Yeah.
because now it's just packed full of politicians that people voted out,
Yeah.
and yet they're now then given a say over legislation for the rest of their lives without any possibility of removal unless they commit some heinous crime.
Yeah.
And then they can have you can have a peerage removed if you really do something beyond the pale.
But has MD ever had a peerage?
I think one or two have.
Yeah,
I think Jeffrey Archer did, for example.
Yeah.
But that's it. You've pretty much got to do something that puts you in jail.
Yeah.
You can't be sacked for any other.
Yeah, it's
reason.
just, it's a fact that they got to vote to give themselves or award themselves a wage rise. Now, who gets to do that in the real world?
Yeah. Well, kind of if you're the chief executive or something,
yeah.
then you usually get a wee.
But it's just, but that's taxpayers' money. This is taxpayers' money.
Exactly.
This is our money. This is the ones like us that are out there working away, struggling to pay our bills, struggling to bring up our families,
or surviving on universal credit.
Surviving on universal credit, or when you get what's the word?
I don't know.
Suspended from it.
That's sanctioned.
Sanctioned, that's the word. The brain's not working as usual. It's, you're seeing people, normal everyday people, who are really struggling, who are struggling to make ends meet, even, whether it's universal credit or they're working or, or disabilities and so forth. And then you've got these people who are just, they're just on a total different planet from the rest of us.
I mean, it's
£300, over £300 a day, and then they can claim lunch on expenses at our expense.
And can take a nap while they're there.
Yeah.
If you're on universal credit, you have to be able to demonstrate that you're looking for looking for work 35 hours a week. It is a full-time job being on universal credit. Whereas there, you turn up, you sign in.
That's it.
You maybe say a few words in a debate, you listen to a bit more, and that's that.
I mean, I've known people on universal credit who, during winter time, are having problems to get into the job centre through public transport.
Yeah.
And they get there late. Then they're sanctioned.
Yeah.
Where's the common sense?
Once again, I mean, it's not a racial divide, it's very much a class divide.
It is
but
a class
again,
divide, but
it's
it's
one
that-
rule for them, one rule for everyone else.
It's just showing you how they're dividing the UK.
Yeah.
It's us and them.
Yeah.
Whether it's a racial or a class, they are dividing.
Or an England-Scotland thing,
They
which
are,
happens as well.
which is, with SNP when they're talking to the
These
SNP,
people,
these people in Parliament, that level of contempt they've got for people that's not within their little circle.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not a great thing. We will obviously keep following it. We're very interested to see if Ruth Davidson does end up accepting this peerage or if she can be shamed out of it. But moving on, ahead of a parliamentary debate on the future of UK fishing, the SNP has repeated warnings of a Tory sellout on Scotland's fishing industry that would leave Scottish fishing communities high and dry. SNP MP Richard Thompson has said UK ministers are gearing up to use Scotland's multi-million-pound fishing sector as a bargaining chip in negotiating the future relationship with the EU, reneging on the promises they made to Scottish fishermen. The UK government has admitted that they will negotiate a mechanism for cooperation with the EU that will include access to waters, which could devastate Scotland's sales of fish and its entire processing and haulage sector. Michael Gove also confirmed yesterday that businesses will need to prepare for significant change, with inevitable border checks for almost everybody who exports to or imports from the EU from next year. This means all Scottish businesses, including Scotland's world-renowned food and drink sector, will face serious friction and barriers in trade with the EU. Commenting ahead of the Westminster Hall debate, the MP for Gordon said, "Any notion that the Tories care about Scottish seafood, whether catching, processing or exports, has been well and truly sunk, as it becomes clear that the Tories look set to sell out the sector completely, leaving Scottish fishing communities high and dry. The Tories have proven time and again that they can't be trusted to stand up for Scotland's industries, which they consider expendable. The proof is in the pudding as they prepare to once again renege on the promises they made to Scottish fishermen. And once again, this is a story that we keep coming back to around Brexit. It's the contempt, really, that the Westminster government has shown to Scottish fishing, both historically in original negotiations around the CFP when they explicitly said that Scottish fishing was expendable, but now this incessant focus during the Brexit campaign on the northeast and the fishing fleet, mostly whitefish fishing fleet coming out of Peterhead and places like that, versus the West Coast fishing, where the bigger concern was always the export markets, which, as Michael Gove says, are now going to face significant barriers, and when freshness of that produce is one of the key factors driving the premium price that Scottish producers can get. What do we make of this ongoing failure to look after the interests of Scottish fishing?
Are we surprised?
This seems to be becoming a refrain for you.
It is, isn't it? Are we surprised? We were talking about this last night as well with Ruth. I'm not surprised. You know, we knew something similar was going, or along these lines were going to happen, regarding, you know, the Brexit and the Tories with Scottish fishing. Yeah, they're going to sell it out. I think they are, and I think it's just despicable. I hope the Scottish Government are doing as much as they can to somehow try and combat, because this is communities. It's not just about one man and his boat, so to speak. It is communities, it is families. So, yeah, I hope the Scottish Government is doing all they can to combat this, which I'm sure they are, because they seem, so far, they have been very vocal. They have been very vocal, and so, but it doesn't surprise me. It really does not surprise me. Heartbreaking to say, it does not surprise me at all.
Yeah, well, in Brussels, the European Parliament has called on Michel Barnier to keep Britain permanently tied to its employment, environment and competition laws as the price for maintaining free trade with the EU. In a resolution adopted by 543 votes to 39 with 69 abstentions, MEPs said there needed to be dynamic alignment with EU standards across a range of issues. As MEPs gave their seal of approval for the maximalist position, the European Commission for the first time wielded its powers under the withdrawal agreement to order the British government to change its domestic law, despite the country having left the EU 2 weeks ago. Under the terms of the transition period, during which the UK stays in the single market and customs union, but with none of Brussels' decision-making institutions, the UK is still required to comply with EU law. The government was given 2 months by the Commission to amend a levy on heavy trucks on which UK-registered drivers can get a discount, which they ruled had discriminated against those based in remaining member states. And this really kind of highlights the whole conflict at the heart of Brexit. The EU has a set of rules, and in order to trade with them, you have to meet those rules. It's a fairly simple argument. But one which the UK seems still not to be grasping very well.
Yeah, again, are we surprised? That's my phrase for the evening, are we surprised? You know, yeah, with Brexit, it was all about, you know, us taking back control. I absolutely hate that phrase, take back control. And about having control over our exports and imports and lots of our own laws and things. But yeah, what people didn't grasp, and I think what the politicians failed to highlight, in order to trade with the EU, you do need to comply with certain rules and standards. And that's always been the case with the EU. They do it with other countries.
For every other country, yeah.
And there is no way that the UK is going to be any different from that. And I'm quite glad that the EU is turning around and saying, you need to comply with these rules, and we were looking to enforce this. So it'll be interesting to see how the politicians at Westminster are going to deal with this, and how they are going to explain this to the public, that we're still tied in order to trade. We are still tied to the EU and some of their rules and regulations. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they explain this to the general public who voted for Brexit, believing in the old colonialism of Great Britain, going back to those days, which
Empire 2.0, I think, was Boris Johnson's phrase.
You know how people want to go back to that. I don't know. However, everybody's got a right to their own view, but it's just that, you know, they don't realise that, yeah, it's just common sense that if you want to trade, you need to comply. And it's the same if people want to trade with the the UK. We will have a certain amount of standards, regulations and rules that we have as a nation, or the United Kingdom, that we would enforce. So at the end of the day, we've got to do that with the other countries as well, and other continents. And
yeah, there's a real problem at the heart of the Brexit movement. This idea that we can take back control, and yet, but they don't seem to understand that other countries are sovereign as well. Yeah. I mean, it is in that sense, you know, a very empire-minded thing. Yeah. Where they think that Britain can take, if Britain takes back control, then the rest of the world will just fall into line with us and do exactly what we want. And I don't know how we can, how the other groups within Britain can challenge that mindset. I don't know how we break through that. In order to just have Britain think of itself like a normal country.
I don't know. This seems to be, I don't know, as I have, and you probably have, we've all come across these people where they've got this strong mindset of this idealistic of what they want the British state to be. And they seem to look back on it with such fondness and you know, and it's like, look at your history. There's nothing to be fond about. It's nothing to be proud of. It is horrific, a lot of it. But it seems to be this, it's a power thing. It's a controlling thing of, we can do what we want and you do as you're told. And this seems to be that similar level playing field of, this is what we want. We are Britain, and you will do as you're told. It's gone back to that old rhetoric, and there's something quite sinister about it. There's something quite nasty about it. I don't think we're ever going to change the mindset of people who really, that is deep-rooted, because, trust me, I have spoken to people like that, and I have tried to, you know, when you explain the kind of nasty side of history with that mindset, they don't see it. It is little blinkers on. They don't see it. All they see is this all-powerful country or union of countries. But yeah, it's very much, it is, and it's horrible. It is horrible, and I don't think we can. I think what we can do is talk to the people and change the mindset of people who don't have that belief as deep-rooted, that are kind of teetering on the edge of that belief. And I think, hopefully, through time, that mindset will naturally die out rather than grow. At the moment, Brexit seems to have opened it up again, and it's opened it up on so many different levels, and people seem more confident to talk like that, which before you would never have dreamed of openly talking, you know, about the empire, or, you know, and these things, and, you know, the nostalgia of the empire, and how we were one of the most almighty, powerful.
Britannia rules the waves.
Yeah, all that, you know, it was like, but the thing is, what I think these people forget is England was so powerful because of the fact of the way they went in and done it. It was horrific. It was horrific, whether it was Scotland, Ireland, or the colonies abroad. It was horrific.
Yeah.
People suffered.
And it's a part of history that we just don't talk about very much.
And I think we need to talk about it. We do need to talk about it. I think maybe bringing it more into the education system.
Yeah.
Because a lot of our kids only know about that because us as adults teach their kids about that, rather than it being part of the education system. And I think it needs to be talked about. I think the parts that our ancestors, our previous generations played in this horrific, whether our ancestors were directly involved or indirectly involved, or were one of the ones that were anarchists fighting against it, we need to talk about it.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the only way to help combat it and to stamp out, because I don't think you can actually change these people's minds once it's in there and they believe, because it's like that's what they've been taught.
Yeah.
And I think people sometimes are fearful of learning what they've been taught has been wrong and incorrect. They like to think what they've been taught is correct. No, the teachers' education hasn't lied to them, government hasn't lied to them, their peers haven't lied to them, and I think that's what is that fear, that security. But I think we need to, in schools, maybe start bringing this in, the horrific history that we're part of.
Absolutely. Now, in Italy, Italy's Senate has formally authorised a criminal case against Matteo Salvini, the far-right leader accused of kidnap last year, when, as Interior Minister, he prevented 177 migrants from disembarking from a Coast Guard ship. Last December, the Italian Court of Ministers in Catania, Sicily, ruled that Salvini should be tried for allegedly depriving the asylum seekers on board the Gregoretti Coast Guard ship of their liberty by refusing to allow them to leave. But in order to start a trial, magistrates needed the backing of the Senate, which today had to decide whether to allow the criminal case against Salvini to go ahead by lifting his immunity, or whether proceedings should be halted. At the end of a heated debate, the majority of the senators voted to lift Salvini's immunity and authorise the trial. The exact numbers of members who voted to authorise the proceedings will be made public this evening. Before the vote, Salvini said his decision to prevent the migrants from disembarking was made with fellow members of government, and on Twitter he paraphrased a quote by the poet and fascist sympathiser Ezra Pound: "If a man is not willing to fight for his ideas, either his ideas are worth nothing or he is worth nothing." Then, in the Senate, Salvini said, "I want to go to a courtroom with my head held high. Defending the borders was my duty. I am proud of what I have done for my children and for the children of this country. Let's have a judge decide if I'm a criminal or if I was just doing my job." So, I mean, this is quite unusual. Obviously, an interior minister getting charged for keeping migrants out of his country. On the face of it, it seems kind of an obvious thing to do, but clearly this was not a normal behaviour. These were migrants who'd been picked up in the sea by the Coast Guard, who were just trying to basically stay alive, and were kept on board this Coast Guard ship, not allowed to get off. And treating it as kidnapping, perhaps an unusual way of addressing it, but it seems like the courts in Italy, or in Sicily specifically, think that ministers have to be held to a higher standard.
Well, I'm actually quite glad that they're doing that and taking that view to hold ministers to a higher standard. It'll be interesting to see how the trial plays out. I'm going to be keeping an eye on it. But no, it's actually quite good. I'm quite pleased to see somebody from a government being held to account and asked to explain his actions. Kidnapping, well, they were held against their will, which is kidnapping. So, yeah, let's see what happens, and let us see what his explanation is for not allowing the people to...
It will be an interesting one to look at going forward. Still dealing with some international legal issues. In the US, under pressure from President Donald Trump, the US Justice Department yesterday abruptly moved to seek a shorter prison sentence for longtime Trump advisor and friend Roger Stone, and all 4 prosecutors quit the case after the highly unusual reversal. Hours after Trump complained on Twitter that Stone was being treated unfairly, senior officials overrode the sentencing recommendation of 7 to 9 years made on Monday by the federal prosecutors who secured Stone's conviction. Stone was found guilty in November on 7 counts of lying to Congress, obstruction, and witness tampering. In a new court filing, a Justice Department official who had not previously worked on the case called that recommendation excessive and unwarranted, and said the department would not make a formal sentencing recommendation. Democrats blasted the department's shift in the high-profile case involving Stone, whose friendship with Trump dates back decades. Stone's trial arose from former special counsel Robert Mueller's investigation that detailed extensive Russian interference in the 2016 election to benefit Trump's candidacy. Trump told reporters he thought that the initial recommendation was ridiculous, but said he did not speak to the Justice Department about it. "I'd be able to do it if I wanted. I have the absolute right to do it. I stay out of things," Trump said. The 4 prosecutors who won Stone's conviction, Aaron Zelinsky, Adam Jed, Michael Mirando, and Jonathan Kravis, withdrew from the case. Kravis told the court in a filing that he was also quitting his job as a federal prosecutor. And this, again, we've seen Trump in the last little while, since he was acquitted by the Senate. He's taken revenge on the people who who testified against him or who gave evidence against him to the House. And we've now seen him seemingly intervening to get lighter sentencing for his corrupt colleagues. What do we think of? I have a feeling I know what the line's going to be here.
Are we surprised? Honestly, Trump and Boris Johnson are like the terrible twins, aren't they? They really are. I couldn't help kind of have a giggle when you were reading that out there when it says he stays out of things. Really? When? Yeah. He's always got an opinion on something. But yeah, are we surprised that he's getting involved and taking revenge on everyone? Mm-hmm. We knew it was going to happen if he was...
It's hard not to laugh, but it is a serious issue. There is a serious amount of corruption in the White House, and of course the Democrats are challenging, trying to find a challenger, and Bernie Sanders won a narrow victory in the New Hampshire primary yesterday, solidifying his position as the frontrunner to challenge Donald Trump in November's general election. Pete Buttigieg, the former mayor of South Bend, Indiana, followed his close second in last week's Iowa caucuses with another close second in New Hampshire, with Minnesota Senator Amy Klobuchar surging to a surprising third. Elizabeth Warren from neighbouring Massachusetts came a disappointing fourth, and former Vice President Joe Biden, long considered the unassailable leader in the field, had his second disappointing result in fifth place. The race now shifts to the Nevada caucuses next week and the South Carolina primary the week after, before 13 states, including California and Texas, vote on Super Tuesday at the beginning of March. Nevada and South Carolina are expected to be even more fertile ground for Bernie Sanders, given their racial diversity. Buttigieg, Klobuchar, and Warren have all struggled to gain traction with Black and Latino voters. Biden, meanwhile, has been banking on the strength of his support from black voters in South Carolina to compensate for his lack of success up to now. With such poor showings in Iowa and New Hampshire, though, some of that support may fade as voters consider whether Biden really has the popularity and campaigning strength to defeat Trump. Also last night, philanthropic entrepreneur Andrew Yang dropped out of the race after failing to place in the top 5 in either of the first 2 states. As the first Asian American candidate to last this far into a presidential campaign, and having outlasted sitting governors, senators, and members of Congress, Yang has significantly opened the Overton window around his central policy of universal basic income, while facing extraordinary hostility from the mainstream media. So, Sam, have you been following the primaries very closely?
No, I haven't. I will be completely honest. No, I haven't. It's a shame that Yang's dropped out.
Yeah.
It is a shame.
Yeah, it's something I've been following his campaign very closely. We've mentioned him on the show several times, but I got interested in his candidacy in part because of how much it reminded me of the independence campaign. There was even a hashtag at one point of "You Yang Yet," which
fantastic!
which leapt out at me. There was this very strongly kind of progressive, almost futuristic kind of what kind of country do we want to be in the 21st century? That was the driving question behind his candidacy. He moved the Overton window substantially on universal basic income. There's now a majority of Democrats in the US support it, and a large majority of voters under 25 support it. It does, again, is this idea of being a young, a youthful movement. It's been a groundbreaking campaign, and the media's role in this, again, as a pro-independence supporter, we all remember Broadcasting Scotland exists because of the just shameful behaviour of the mainstream media. With Andrew Yang, if you Google Yang media blackout, you'll find an article by Scott Santons dealing with all of the instances of this, him being left out of polling graphics, being misnamed by the multiple networks. He was given the least speaking time in almost every debate. And as I've said a number of times on Twitter and elsewhere, even if the intention wasn't racist, the outcome was, because this was a historic candidacy. Got more Asian Americans involved in politics than have ever been involved before. Really drove a new conversation, was bringing new ideas with a lot of detail, a lot of insight, and just really got shafted by the media and indeed to a certain extent by the Democrats themselves. He has said he will be carrying on in politics in some form. Some people have talked about him running for New York governor or New York mayor. Others have talked about already a run in 2024 if either Trump is elected again, or if someone like Biden or Sanders wins and decides that at their age they only want to run for one term.
I think the problem is, as we have seen on many occasions, is the amount of power that the media have.
Absolutely.
Giving out the wrong information. And that with Yang has also happened, where the media have so much power and they distort the information going out there to the public, which is very dangerous. Hopefully, as you say, he carries on and has another run at it, because America is crying out for somebody like that. They need someone like Andrew Yang. At the moment, they're going backwards. You see them just with Trump going backwards and rather than forwards. Yeah.
Well, that was his line. Was Trump wanted to roll the clock back. He was always about moving forward.
And yes, we need more progressive leadership in the world community. Yeah. The world is changing in a lot of different ways, and we do need these forward-thinking leaders.
Absolutely.
Throughout the world. So hopefully, fingers crossed, he has another run at it.
Yeah. Well, back in Scotland, relocating COP26 to London would be a further blow for the UK government's credibility, Scottish Green co-leader Patrick Harvey has said. Following reports that the UK government has approached the XL London venue about hosting the COP26 Climate Change Summit instead of Glasgow, Patrick Harvey said, "Glasgow has the infrastructure and venue to host the COP International Summit. We also have many people keen to challenge the UK and Scottish Government on their lack of action tackling the climate emergency. Glasgow has a fantastic opportunity to use the platform to be heard." The UK Government has already left the world wondering if it is serious about this conference. They've sacked the person in charge, they've shown more interest in union flags and provoking a spat with the Scottish Government, and they have shown none of the leadership that's needed. If they now can't even decide which venue to book, they will lose any remaining shred of credibility. They should confirm Glasgow as the venue, appoint a genuine climate leader to chair the conference, and then start the urgent job of building support for the radical change of direction that the climate emergency demands. And I think what Patrick Harvey is saying there would be echoed by virtually everybody from the Scottish Government to the climate change campaigners to a huge number of Scottish citizens as well. This is something that Glasgow has prepared for.
Yep.
And now Boris Johnson, for seemingly political reasons, because he doesn't want to have a conversation with Nicola Sturgeon, is ready to try and take it away.
That's basically what it comes down to. Is he scared of Nicola? Is there a reason? Is he scared of coming up to Glasgow and speaking to his wonderful, friendly Scottish people? It's another level of contempt, and Patrick Harvey is right. We're prepared. Glasgow's prepared for it. You think of all the businesses in Glasgow who have been preparing for this. Hotels, guest house, restaurants, bars, shops.
Even the police.
I mean, the police, I'm led to believe the police are already doing training at the moment for this. Security companies, emergency services, you name it, everything right across the board is already, things are in place. These things do not take a week or two or a month or two to organise.
Yeah.
There is a lot of prep work there. And to do Boris Johnson to suddenly kind of think me this idea about London, it's contempt, it's undermining the Scottish Government, it's undermining Nicola Sturgeon, it's undermining the Glasgow, it's undermining Scotland. We've already put all the work in. He's despicable. He's just,
Yeah.
let
Let me guess, we're not very surprised at him doing something like this.
No, you know, but the thing is, what concerns me is something as serious as climate change and dealing with our climate, which is a very serious issue. It's like he's using it as a tool, you know, he's just, you know, if he suddenly now decides, right, we're going to London, London's not prepared, the police service is not prepared, the security services are not prepared, hotels, everything is not prepared. World leaders, because obviously they've got to prepare, because they've got to plan, their security services have got to plan for bringing these people over, and no doubt these people already around their security, making sure things, you know, for especially hotels where they're going to be staying, travelling, you know, is he wanting it to fall apart? Is he wanting it so that now that if he now suddenly changes it to London last minute, that now what happens is we turn around and we've got half of the world leaders cancelling because they're unable to get accommodation, their security advisors are not happy.
There's a lot to worry about. Of course, Boris Johnson is very possibly and very probably concerned that there may well be an independence referendum before COP26 even happens.
Yes.
Anyway, moving on to another conference in Glasgow. People with lived experience will lead the agenda at a Scottish conference on drug use in Glasgow. This event at the SECC on Wednesday the 26th of February is being organised jointly by the Scottish Government and Glasgow City Council. Sessions will include contributions from Public Health Minister Joe Fitzpatrick and Councillor Susan Aitken, the leader of Glasgow City Council. The discussions will help inform Scottish input to the UK Drug Summit on Thursday 27th of February at the same venue. There will also be training in the use of naloxone, which reverses the effects of an opioid overdose, and a demonstration model of a safer drug consumption facility. Mr Fitzpatrick said, "What Scotland faces in terms of drug deaths is nothing short of a public health emergency. The UK event, while welcome, simply does not have the voices of people with lived experience in Scotland at its heart. We've pressed the UK government to extend their event to accommodate this, but this has not yet been forthcoming. We've been clear that the views and insights of people with lived experience must help shape how we tackle the high number of drug deaths in Scotland. As a result, we are working with Glasgow City Council to host a Scottish summit on the eve of the UK event to try and better highlight the problem in Scotland." And we are just going to have to move on. We've run a wee bit short of time to our last story. The creation of a new social security system for Scotland has reached a new landmark with a £3.4 billion allocation for benefit spend in the latest budget announcement. The Scottish Government has already introduced 7 benefits, including Best Start Grant, which offers financial support to low-income families in the early years of a child's life, and the Funeral Support Payment, the standard rate of which is being increased from £700 to £1,000 from April. In the next 18 months, the pace of delivery will significantly increase. The Scottish Government will introduce the new Scottish Child Payment by the end of the year, and new disability payments, starting with the Child Disability Payment this summer. As part of this budget, the Scottish Government has committed £73 million for discretionary housing payments. This includes £60 million a year for continuing to mitigate the UK Government's bedroom tax, and an increase of £2 million so care-experienced young people receiving a qualifying benefit are further supported from April. The Scottish Welfare Fund also increases by £3 million from £38 million to £41 million from 2020-21. So, on both of these stories, what's jumping out at you?
First of all, with the drug forum, I agree that lived experience, people with lived experience should be there.
Absolutely.
They need to be part of the process. The UK Government not want them there, it just seems a bit half-hearted.
Yeah, it's the same as the Poverty Truth Commission's slogan. Nothing about us without us is for us.
Yeah.
And if people who have experience aren't part of the conversation, aren't leading the conversation, you're always going to get the wrong answers.
You are, and you're going to get these think tanks from people who have never had experience coming up with these ideas that may not, probably won't work, and money has been wasted. Surely we should be concentrating, we've got this money, right, how do we help people with drug problems? Right, tell you what, let's go and talk to the people with lived experience. That's how we do it. It's just, UK Government, the moment, social security powers, I think it's great. Everything is it's a wee bit positive. It's not as much money as, it's a small increase, but it's something. It's not a decrease. And it's about moving forward thinking, and basically starting to lay the groundwork of the type of country that we want to be.
Exactly.
One of the quotes I heard from the World Health Organization is, the world is as strong as its weakest link. A nation is as strong as its weakest link. And if we can look after our most vulnerable in society, that benefits all of us upwards. So, through time, it would be nice to see the budget going up for that. I can't believe we're still mitigating for the bedroom tax.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
at least we can do that.
Yeah.
And
it goes back to what Mary Black was saying
we need more
at Scottish Questions. If the
we
powers
just
aren't
need-
there,
we
then
just
there's
need
only so much that
independence.
can be done.
We need to cut their ties.
Well, that seems like a perfect note to end on. So I'd like to thank Sam for joining us. It is always a pleasure. It's never a surprise. So I'd like to thank Sam for that.
Thank you for having me.
We'd like to thank you for joining us as well at home. It's always a pleasure to have you too. If you're able to support us financially, we would love that. It makes a big difference to what we can achieve here at Broadcasting Scotland. If you're able to, please go to broadcastingscotland.scot/register, sign up as a supporter. Your £5 a month will make all the difference. But as Sam was telling us just before we came on air, she had to step in and host the show last night after Gordon and I were both unavailable. And she survived, and she did very well.
It was terrifying, but I survived.
Oh. Sorry, I think we are back now. We're always looking for more people to get involved here at Broadcasting Scotland, just so that if one of us is taken ill or one of us isn't available, there's always more people that can come in. There's also behind the camera roles as producers, techs, camera operators, and especially journalists. We would love it if there's some journalist out there or some aspiring young student journalist, some retired journalist maybe, that wants to come in the afternoons and prepare the stories for us. There's only so much that we can do in the time with the power, with the manpower that we have available to us. So if you're able to help in any way, if you want to get involved, find out how a TV station works, this is the place to do it. There's no entry requirements other than your enthusiasm. So if you are interested in any way, please do get in touch with us. But until then, that has been all we've got for you tonight on Scotland at 7. We'll be back tomorrow with Gordon at 7. And I'll probably be back on Sunday for the full Scottish. So until then, it's been a pleasure to have you. Thanks for joining us. I will see you again soon.